should keep my microphone on. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our January meeting of the Joint Standards Committee. It's great to have a full house. We have a full house around the table. I would also just like to welcome one of our independent persons, Mr. Richard Gadd, who is joining us remotely. So, Richard, can you hear us? We can't hear you, sir. So if you turn your microphone off.
I'm sorry, I can, Chair. Thank you.
Great, lovely. Thank you. Great to have you with us, Richard, and we will try as best we can to fully include you in all of our discussions, but good to have you with us. Also like to welcome Sheena Spence, who is the Chief Officer of the Yorkshire Local Councils Associations, or YLCA as the abbreviation, and she's been asked to come and chat to us, and we look forward to her contribution a little bit later on. As I said, we are a full committee, so there are no apologies. So we move to item number 1 on the agenda, which is declarations of interest. So if anybody has any declarations of interest, please indicate it now. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. I'll declare an interest in item 8 since some of the cases there involve me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Nope. That's lovely. We then move on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is the exclusion of press and public. This is to consider the exclusion of the press and public from the meeting during consideration of exempt annexes A and B to agenda item number 8, which is the monitoring officer's report on the complaints. And that is because they contain information which is likely to reveal the identity of the individuals. So can I just have a vote that we're happy to exclude press and public for that particular? Okay, lovely. Thank you. And then swiftly on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is the minutes of our last Joint Standards Committee meeting held on the 17th of November. And you will have those in front of you. Congratulations to Parish Councillor Rawlings, who was elected as the Vice Chair. There is one more meeting that you may well have to chair if I'm not available, but there's only one thing I had, and that is that obviously in terms of those that were present, do we need to annotate that Mr. Gadd was actually remotely attending rather than in person? Do we need to make a note of that?
Matter for you, Chair, if you wish me to do that.
I think just for consistency, we do indicate that Mr. Gadd was actually here remotely. Thank you.
Chair, it's a generic point. We've had sensible listening.
So is your microphone on?
Yes, it is, but I was not.
That's it.
It's because it's that way and you're that way. It would be sensible to have a policy for all meetings if people are attending remotely, rather than you as an individual chair remembering to say something. If the Democratic Services people put an asterisk against names or had a generic note, otherwise you're going to get inconsistency in policy in different council meetings, and I assume you'd be out of consistency.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. I had assumed that my acceptance of the fact that that was going to be noted as it being remote would be the case for future meetings, but we will just clarify that.
Sorry, but not just for these meetings, but it seemed like a sensible policy. But whatever is the consistent policy for full council meetings, committee meetings, subcommittee meetings, otherwise your Democratic Services support staff will run into difficulties as to what they're recording.
Okay, we take note of what you're saying, but it's not in our remit to decide that or suggest that. We can only look after this meeting. But thank you so much for your point there. Appreciate your comments. Yeah. So with the changes that we've made, can I just have a show of hands that you're happy for me to sign these? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. That brings us on to our item number 4, which is urgent business. We have no items of urgent business. That then brings us on to item number 5 on the agenda. Public participation. We have nobody participating in this meeting registered to speak in this meeting, and then that brings us on to item number 6, which is the work undertaken support offered by the Yorkshire Local Councils Association. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Sheena. Again, thank you for your time. We are in your hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee, for inviting the YLCA to speak to you, tell you a little bit about what we do, how we work with the parish councils, and really how we've been working with your legal services department as well on some of the issues that our member councils have. And of course, we have been involved in the past in appointing the parish representatives to this body, and I'm pleased to see the three of you here this afternoon. Chair, I have circulated, of course, the training programme, a little bit about what we do, our advice, service and benefits of membership. The benefits document is fairly comprehensive. I wouldn't have thought you would want me to go through this verbatim, but I'm happy just to pick up on a couple of points coming out of it. In the York area, and obviously we're a membership organisation, we cover North, South and West Yorkshire. And in the York area, every council is in membership of YLCA apart from one. It came out of membership probably about 3-4 years ago, and it doesn't seem keen to want to come back in, but we're not actually sure why that is. But the rest are in membership, and I think sometimes, even though councillors don't realise, their clerks are contacting us on a regular basis, and we're supplying lots of information, which I hope that the parish councillors around the table are seeing frequently as well. We've been in existence since 1944, so we're not a new organisation at all. And there is one of us in every county of the country, including Wales, because parish councils exist in their community council form in Wales, but none in Scotland, just as a matter of interest. You've seen how we're governed. It's by the members themselves. So the members are the councils as corporate bodies, and it is their representative councillors who, through our branch system, that's the electoral college for the joint executive board that we have. So we are governed by the councils that pay a membership fee to us, which, to be honest, we're very proud to be able to say that. And our purpose, as you can see, is to give advice, guidance, information to parish and town councils. At the moment, we have 560 in membership, and that includes some parish meetings, which are in parishes that are so small, they've probably got more sheep than people, and there is no parish council, but numerous of those in North Yorkshire. And North Yorkshire is quite unusual in that respect. We don't give legal advice. Legal advice is part of the membership fee through the National Association of Local Councils. Their team of solicitors is there to give legal advice to our member councils and to our member parish meetings if they need it. That's part, as I say, of the membership fee. Councils don't pay extra for that. And our fee is in two elements. Part for YLCA to help us to run, to help us to deliver our services, and an element that we pass on to the National Association of Local Councils, who you might all have heard of. They're based in London, if you like, the parent body for parish and town councils, and we receive a lot of our information from them. Every parish council that joins a county association is affiliated to the National Association of Local Councils as well. They can't go direct, they have to come through us if they want advice, but we do that on their behalf. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on either what membership entails, services that we provide, and I also provided you with a copy of our training programme. This is just a snapshot in time, of course, from January to March this year. So a comprehensive annual programme, because that's repeated throughout the year with different courses, all sorts of opportunities for parish and town councillors.
Lovely. Good. I do have a number of questions, but I want to open it up to my colleagues, including Mr. Gadd, who's remote. So, ladies and gentlemen, any Councillor Rawlings.
Thank you, Chair. Quite happy to open the session. Can I start by thanking you for the great work that you do as a parish councillor you're very, very supportive and feeding the information through the clerk is a really great service. If I get the opportunity to talk at any time to the parish council who's not a member, then I will be talking on those grounds, because I think it's a shame that one is not a member and it stands out in our City of York Parish Council collective. Couple of things that kind of come to light here. First of all, the training plan that you've put in, a fantastic widespread of training that people can buy into. My knowledge, though, of the parish council that I'm involved in is very few actually do buy into that training programme. So you're putting an excellent programme together, but the participation rate is poor. Is that true? That's my perception. Is that true? And if it is true, what can we do to help, apart from the ones which we're actually linked with, to help improve that? Would be my first question, if I may.
Thank you. I think that's a good question. It isn't true. For example, we had a public rights of way training session day before last with 26 delegates on, which on a remote session is just about right, really. And, you know, it's a good number to manage. That's not uncommon. So we are getting really good response. There's the odd course that we have to cancel, mostly around employment, because if there's anything comes out about employment, people tend to bury their head in the sand, unfortunately. But the take up is excellent. So, for example, our budget for this year for training income, we have actually just extended that by a couple of thousand to 38,000 for the year. So you can see that it's pretty successful. And that includes doing whole council training as well. And if I may, Chair, I'll just elaborate on that a little. But I mean, when COVID hit, of course, nobody could do anything. And so we, at that time, discovered this power to do remote training and how efficient it was. And I appreciate that not everybody wants to do that. People like face-to-face. And I think it is good, isn't it, to sit in a room. And we want to introduce some more of that back in. We're starting to think about venues that we could go to. But the remote training has worked, you know, amazingly. And we can do all kinds of topics and what have you. We do clerk training on there as well. So yes, it's working well, but I'm looking forward to getting back to a little bit face-to-face.
And what I will add to that is I need to go back and pressurise some of my parish councils to participate in the training a little bit more. But that's great. And thank you very much for answering the question. The other question I have is how can we improve how we pass things and use you to help with communications? The example would be the code of conduct. We as a committee had a position where there was almost 50 different codes of conducts because every parish council has a different code, as well as the City of York has a different code. We've done an awful lot of work to come up with one which we think would suit everybody. And we want to encourage parish councils to sign up to it. Now, I know this has been passed to yourself, and I know it's been passed to all the parish councils, but so far, not an awful lot have actually amended their code of conduct. How do we make sure that they're getting that information across and they're making an informed decision? If they decide not to buy into a generic code of conduct, that's fine. That's their prerogative to do so. But my concern is they're not actually consciously making that decision. How do we improve that kind of communication link?
I think you're right, Councillor. We see that happening across Yorkshire. So back in 2012, when the current ethical framework was introduced, the National Association produced a model code of conduct for parishes. And I think most parishes tended to adopt that rather than write their own. Some councils adopted the Principal Authority Code, which obviously was acceptable as well. And then when the Local Government Association produced its code, its new code, year before last year, can't remember now, lost track of dates. Yeah, there's a consultancy firm, Hoey Ainscough, who I know that Francis is aware of, that the National Association did some work with as well. Because the National Association basically has said, our model code that we had in 2012, what we're doing now is putting that on the back burner. We want parishes to adopt the LGA code. So we've put out quite a few items in our White Rose bulletin, encouraging councils to do that, sent them out briefing papers. Hoey and SCO have written a briefing paper specifically for parishes on the LGA code. Now, it might be that there's a bespoke York code that you want York parishes to have a look at, and I can't see any issue if that's the case in us helping you to promote that. And there really are the two, I think the two sensible options for parishes in the York area.
I mean, if I may there, we've agreed that the LGA with very slight amendments, there was a couple of small amendments on the value of gifts to be reported, I think, if I remember correctly, has been passed out. From our perspective, ultimately having to, I hate the word, enforce the code of conduct against a complaint. If it is consistent across all parish councils, or nearly consistent across all parish councils, as well as the City of York, it makes that role of an inquiry an awful lot easier.
Yes, and of course you can't enforce it. It has to be. We always have to remember that the parishes are independent local authorities, in their own right, and like I said, the enforcement isn't possible. But I think that kind of flags up to us that maybe what we could do is do another drive for adoption of the LGA code, at least with the parish, the kind of Hoey and SCO parish slight amendments, so that it's more suitable to that smaller local authority. So
that would be extremely helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got any questions or comments? No? So I just have a few, Sheena. So again, thank you for your time. So before I do, Mr. Gadd, do you have any questions?
Chair, if I may, first of all,
yeah.
I thank Sheena for that description, also for the very detailed table. I've got two questions. First of all, I'd support the idea that there is the opportunity for people to attend code of conduct training on a voluntary basis. And secondly, I wonder whether independent people might be allowed to observe some of the training undertaken, or whether that would be inappropriate. Thank you.
Thank you.
An interesting point, something that we haven't thought of, but we can. I don't think it's something that you would just dismiss out of hand. So I would be interested to have a further conversation about it. I'm really keen to have as many people informed about how things should work as possible, because then you develop that general knowledge, don't you? That general, everybody working cohesively. It's important. So yeah, I'm happy to have a think about that. Interesting.
Good. And was there another question, Mr. Gadd, or was that your two questions all rolled into one?
That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. Again, thank you, Sheena, for a very, very exhaustive document that you sent through to us, and also the schedule of training. So I am, as well as being an elected City of York councillor, I am, by virtue of that, I attend 5 parish councils within my ward. You will be pleased to know all of them are members of YLCA, and we benefit very much from that. I'm also aware that this committee, along with the Audit and Governance Committee and with Democratic Services, are looking to put together an induction programme for new councillors, particularly post the local elections in May. Do you have a similar kind of induction training programme that you would offer to parish councils, and would there be any benefit in City of York councillors attending that, or would there just be like an overlap of training? I'm seeing if there's any way in which we could kind of work cohesively. That's my first question. Yeah,
I've had a little bit of a discussion with Francis about, and taking the last point first, about City of York councillors, because Obviously, the legislation that principal authorities work at is slightly different to the legislation that parish level councillors work at. And sometimes, and not to offend anyone, but you know, it's good to have an understanding of how they both work. So I know I've had a sort of preliminary conversation with Francis about coming and doing some training for City of York councillors on how parish councils should operate, so that they've got that knowledge. And then going back to the training, we're not delivering an awful lot of code of conduct training. We do probably 2 or 3 a year. In terms of induction for councillors after the May elections on generally their role, their responsibilities, their duties, how the parish council operates, the legislation that it has to adhere to, we start off with what we call off to a flying start, which we're doing remotely, but are organising face-to-face. So that's a 5-hour training session. We follow that up around about 3 months later with developing your skills, which then it's kind of given the councillors opportunity to have been through a couple of meetings, got a bit better feel for it, gathered more questions. So we do developing new skills. And then on top of that, we say, come along to these bespoke sessions that we do, you know, where they can, somebody might think, well, I'm quite interested in how committees operate. I'll go to the committee session. Let me expand my knowledge a bit more on that. So once they've got the basics, there's a real opportunity then for them to go on different sessions as well. And we can also take them on training for things like the certificate in local council administration. We've only had 2 councillors ever that have done that qualification, but parish councillors could do that if they wish to do so as well. So I think really in terms of induction, there is a good opportunity there for them.
Okay, that's good. Sorry, Councillor Fisher.
Produce a follow-up point to that. Last night, Audit and Governance approved an incredibly detailed training package for new councillors and obviously for existing councillors. Now, obviously, that requires funding. I'm also very pleased to meet you, shall I say, because it's nice to put a face to the name that fills my email inbox on a regular basis. No, I'm not complaining at all. Part of the problem is I'm not sure all parish councils include a significant amount for training. I mean, I chair Strenson, which being the largest council, we have £1,000 set aside each year for training of councillors. And we do encourage every new councillor to go on courses, you know, to do with code of conduct, particularly planning, if they would sit in the planning committee. I think part of the issue is encouraging parish councils to include training in their budget, so they have actually got the opportunity to pay the fees for the courses. And I mean, I also, you know, wonder whether or not the other thing is, and it's something I've thought a long time, if there is a democratic deficit in York because the centre doesn't have parish councils and consequently doesn't have a wider group of people who are involved in decision making and, you know, have access to things like, for example, planning panels. You know, I'm sure the planning panels in York and Councillor Kilbane, Councillor de Gore have planning panels. Perhaps they could benefit from that YLCA training as well.
Good. My next, thank you, Councillor Fisher. My next kind of comment really is that of the 5 parish councils that I attend, I am a member of one by virtue of living in the village, and I attend the other 4 as the ward councillor. Every one of those parish councils carries vacancies, and it's a very small parish council that doesn't. About 4 parish councils that are on it. Is that kind of the norm? Is that indicative across parish councils? And clearly you're nodding that it is. And I don't know. How can we, as a City of York Council, I appreciate that we're almost kind of stepping out of the remit of this committee, but how can we, as a City of York Council, help? Because I've got to say, I have been absolutely thoroughly enjoyed working with our parish council members on this committee. I think they've been a phenomenally proactive bunch of parish councillors who have stepped in to situations when we have not been able to for whatever reason. So, you know, I think seeing that cohesive work on this committee shows that we can work together. But is there anything that we can do as a City of York Council in terms of helping and encouraging people to kind of step up to parish councils? I'm curious as to hear your thoughts on that.
And I don't want to disappoint you either. I think without kind of sitting and having a good think about it, you see, the parish councils have various resources at their fingertips from the National Association of Local Councils. It has an elections toolkit with bright, colourful posters, come and be a parish councillor, trying to attract people. I think from City of York's perspective, I don't know what you could do locally, because it's getting those local people, isn't it, interested and having that role being sufficiently attractive for people to come along. And it has its inherent problems in that, for example, at parish level, there is no dependent carers allowance. It's something that NALC is lobbying for and has done for a long time. And maybe now we've got a bit more stability, who knows, that might, you know, lobbying might work. But, you know, things like that do marginalise people from coming forward to be a parish councillor if they've got no one to look after the children or any dependents that they have. That can be an issue. So, but there are a lot of people out there who could step up. But there are many factors, aren't there, as to why they don't. How do councils make that role attractive to somebody? And I think a lot of the time councillors come on and they probably don't realise that they're going to be part of an employing body, particularly in smaller councils. I think that comes as a surprise. And so we've developed a sort of a job description that clerks can send out to prospective candidates beforehand, so that they've got a really good understanding of what they have to do before they actually get there. Is it an exciting enough job to get people on? And you know, there's plenty of materials to try and attract people, and I think that parish councils themselves need to be proactive. But how City of York Council can kind of feed into that, we'd probably need to kind of have a bit of a brainstorming, if that's still allowed to be said, exercise about how the parishes could be assisted.
That's fine. I mean, I can only remember, and I stand to be corrected, I can only remember there ever being one election in the last 4 years, and that was a by-election in one of our kind of town councils, but I can't remember anything else other than that. Sorry, gentlemen, are you either any you wanted to?
We were just commenting. The only one I know at a general election or a local election level was Yorkshire had an election in 2015.
Right, and that was long before my time. Councillor Fisher.
Yeah, it was Haxby that had the election. This one,
right.
It was my sister-in-law who won it.
Yeah.
If I can, I was at a meeting in South Yorkshire at a very large council earlier this week, and it hadn't had a proper election, contested election for 28 years. Wow. And a huge electorate, but still no interest. So it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How can you attract people, you know, when you've got a smaller electorate to kind of select from? Okay. It is a difficult task.
So that kind of brings on my next point, and that's that. And again, please, this is just an observation. It is not in any way meant to be a criticism. So of the 5 parish councils that I attend, I was made aware of YLCA very early on. The clerk of each of the parish councils I attend is very much involved with YLCA. We haven't had any direct input, so we haven't had any visits. Kind of visits and interaction with parish councils. Is that something? And I appreciate you're a very small team, and it's a big area that you have to cover. Do you do kind of visits to parish councils and interactions in a direct sense?
We do. We have to be selective where a council has got difficulties, which is why I was out at this large town council earlier this week. I'd love to go and listen to all these parish council meetings, and it's just not possible. And it's the same when I've talked to you about whole council training, where we get all the members of a council together, and again we give all of them the information. They're all learning together, but we only do that for councils that are troubled and have issues, because we just don't have the capacity. I have a team of there's 5 of us all together.
Yeah, I saw the list of.
Yes,
of who's
so that's one of the reasons. I think we'd love to be able to make more, you know, face-to-face contact.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful. But at the moment, and certainly in the past, it's not really been a possibility.
Okay, that's fine. And then I have one final question, which brings it more into the arena of this committee, really, and that's that when we look at the list of complaints, and it would be fair to say that as a committee, we have been phenomenally busy over the last 4 years. We've had an awful lot of complaints that have come through. The majority of those have been parish council complaints. So in terms of trying to understand why there are so many parish council complaints, would you have any comment on that, whether it's to do with possible a lack of training, a lack of understanding, a lack of cohesion from this committee to parish councils? I'm just curious as to why you think we've had more, or your thoughts on why we've had more parish council complaints than we have City of York council complaints.
It is, isn't it, an interesting question? And there are other principal authorities in Yorkshire that are in the same position. I don't think that York is unique in that. And I think it's an amalgam of all of the things that you mentioned. I think on top of that, we see possibly people who are maybe unwell as well, contributing to that doesn't help. We've had COVID, you know, some people have struggled through that, and that hasn't helped with people's possibly mental positions. There are we see council infighting. When you think about it, when a council's elected, you potentially have between from 5 onwards people who have to come together and work as a team. Some of them might not know one another, especially when you get a lot of people together. Relationships might not develop how you want them to. So you know, those internal clashes, that's very common as well. So I think that there are a number of factors that kind of lead to the various problems that you're seeing. In terms of training, we have certainly, you know, in the past years trained a good many councillors in the code. I think a lot of councillors don't understand the differences between the types of interests that they have to declare, and you know, identifying whether it is a DPI or maybe just a personal other interest, as it's defined in the NALC code, as was. So part of our training is to try and get councillors to understand the type of interest, and then because of the type of interest that they decide on, that then directs them in the action that they need to take at the meeting, and taking the appropriate action, either leaving the room or staying within the room as is permitted within the parish sector. A whole range of contributing factors, I think, is where I would kind of start at.
But from what I gathered in your answers there, we're not alone in that. So that tends to be the case across the board. I'm just going to open up Councillor Goodbain and then Councillor Galvin. Councillor Goodbain.
No, thanks, Chair, and just a supplementary for that, and thanks for your important contribution, Sheila. How do you feel about it if this committee was to recommend? I think recommend is probably as strong as we could go, that as a resolution to some of these complaints, people are sent on the dealing with complaints in difficult situations course, for example. I don't know what, you don't always like to have students on courses who've been told to go on them. So I'd like to know what your what your thoughts are on that, and also whether or not there is scope for a training course that, you know, helps. Maybe dysfunctional is too strong a word, but councils that aren't operating as well as they could to operate better.
Okay, so yes, and certainly we've had recommendations, haven't we, from this committee. I've seen in reports where YLCA councillors have been recommended to obtain training from YLCA, and we have done that for some of them. But yes, there are other sessions on our training programme that might be relevant for some councillors to come on. That's absolutely fine. And then just repeat your last little bit, Councillor Kilbane.
Just, you know, I was looking through the courses and I couldn't see anything that was really aimed at a council that wasn't functioning as well as it could be.
Okay, so that's where the whole council training comes in. But in addition to that, if there's a council as a body that isn't functioning right, we'd offer a different kind of service. So we'd start off by doing a health check. So that tends to look at their policies and their procedures. As we have done with a couple of councils, not one of the York councils, we would go in and do a full governance review, which goes from interviewing councillors, leading right through to a written report on our findings, attending meetings, training, written report on our findings, leading to an action plan with realistic targets for the council to implement new ways of working and working together. So they tend to be the mechanisms that we use when you've got a dysfunctional body, rather than an individual councillor that might be causing issues.
But I guess you'd have to be invited in by that parish council to do that, wouldn't you? And that might be the sticking point.
Not always. Sometimes we're proactive and we suggest that really is needed. But of course, we can't enforce it. Yeah, the council has to resolve to engage our services.
Sorry, Councillor Galvin, unless this is a supplementary, Councillor Fisher.
All I was going to say, Chair, just as a matter of interest, when the standards boards were set up in, I think, about 2001, 2002, the National Standards Board, I think something like 60 to 65% of the complaints were from parish councils. And in many ways, I think it got to the point where the board was costing that much money to run that they scrapped it and in fact offered local authorities to scrap their standard board as well. Just as a matter of interest, it's nothing new. It's how it is.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fisher. Sorry, Councillor Calvin. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. I was just going to say that I've sat on 3 panels. One of them was a case where a chair had not understood the law and co-option and misapplied it. So our sanction was to go on a YLCA training course, because at the end of the day, he'd not done anything wrong deliberately. It was simply that he was new chair, didn't know the law, and so that's the way of dealing with it. The other thing that's pretty critical, and I think I shall be going on this webinar tonight when I get home, if I get home in time, is the chair's discussion forum, which is about how to handle difficult meetings. Because I mean, we've seen situations like Hanford Parish Council, which, you know, we've seen are splashed all over. I mean, you know, you can say what you want about the whole handling of that matter, but sometimes a good chair who knows how to handle things with, that knows what the law is, it is critically important. I've learned sort of by the seat of my pants, having been a chair for 6 years, and I'm very lucky to have a very good vice chair to keep me in line, a good parish clerk. But being a chair of a parish council is difficult when things kick off. And we had incidents over the cemetery rules where things kicked off, and dealing with it wasn't the council that were causing the problem, it was the public. And, you know, knowing how to handle those matters and not step the wrong side of standards law by saying something out of line or throwing somebody out of a meeting when you don't have the right to do so. It is critical that the parish council have chairs who are well trained and really do know what they're doing. And that's why that webinar tonight for me is extremely important. And it's producing that kind of thing will reduce the number of standards complaints, I think.
Please do come back to you.
So the chair's discussion forum is that's our first one that we've done. We've been doing clerks discussion forums and councillor discussion forums, which are free of charge. So any clerk, any councillor can join those. Really interesting discussions, helping each other. So we've introduced the chair's discussion forum on the back of the success of the others. Again, they're free of charge. First one tonight. So yes, if you get that, please do. And they'll happen every month. That's our plan. once a month.
Good. Ms. Lee.
Talking from the outside, not being a councillor, there is a democratic deficit point being made here. Too many posts, not enough candidates. Until you can get to a situation where you have competition for posts, then if they stand, they are elected. If you want to become a councillor on the principal council, in most cases, you're going to have to go through a election process. If you can't get into a situation where maybe the principal authority can help with that, unless you can get to a situation where you have more candidates than you have posts, you have a problem. And nothing in this world is going to resolve that problem other than observing it is a very poor form of democracy that allows anybody who puts their head above the wire to become a councillor. This is an outsider's perspective, but a lot of the discussion you've just been having is about, gee, we've got some problems here, but you're underpinning it with the comment, and we have to really getting people willing to take the roles.
Go on, Councillor Galvin, then I'll bring
Can I
Councillor
just say, I'm glad somebody raised this point, because I have clerked a parish council many years ago. I have chaired.
Are you available?
Sorry?
Are you available?
I have chaired parish council, a small parish council. And I've been involved one way or another with parish councils in the past many years ago. And with exceptions, when, and I'm sorry, the local government changed in 74, a lot of town councils and parish councils that then set up thought they were kind of successor authorities of the previous authority. And there's a lot of aggro went on, and I would say I chaired parish council that was in that position. I just make this point. I don't know how many parish councillors there are in York. I think it's 31 or 32 parish councils. 31. As I recall, and I stand to be corrected, at the last election, I'm not sure if there were any more than 3 or 4 parish councils at elections. And I know that parish councils, I have 2 in my ward. One is a small one, which I chaired. One is a bit bigger. And make no apology, I don't go near it. Quite frankly, I haven't done for years, for a number of reasons, which I won't bore you with. But people get co-opted. There ain't many parish council elections. And they virtually twist people's arms to go on. And I've seen the turnover of one of my parish councils is quite unbelievable. But just an observation, you mentioned it, I wasn't going to mention it, but you're absolutely right. There is a great democratic deficiency, but it does beg a rather more interesting question, which I won't put on the table.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Yeah, thank you. I chair a parish council with 14 members. Theoretically, we have 8 now. We had 8. Sadly, we lost one of our best parish councillors. Who passed away just before Christmas, which was a terrible loss. Unfortunately, we're able to recruit another one to replace it, but we are running at the point now where we're almost non-quorate in some meetings. We have to ring round to check that people are available so they can work. But there is a further issue about competence, which is the general power of competence, because if your number of councillors that are actually elected during the election cycle drops below a certain proportion, I think that's correct. It has implications for the function. So you can be, it causes significant problems. And, I'm literally in the position now of trying to badger as many people as possible to stand for election, because if anyone stands down, we could be in a deeply difficult position to run one of the largest parish councils in York, the 4th largest.
It's not dissimilar to this situation in local government full stop. And I've been a recruiting sergeant. For local elections for 30 years. And it's no different to senior authorities. I can tell you that York will struggle for every party to get candidates in the elections this year. There's no doubt about it. Arms get twisted up backs. But that's how it is, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what the answer is. Far be it me to think about it.
Yeah, I don't. Thank you. Councillor Galvin. I'm just aware that we've given this a
Yeah,
really
that's
good
right.
airing,
We'll move on.
and I do appreciate
Well,
everybody's
intensity,
contributions.
yeah.
I don't want to, unless everybody has any burning comments or questions, and I must include Mr. Gadd. No. Okay, Sheena, thank you so much. I'm sure there's lots we could talk about, and I would be keen to talk to you personally. Outside of this meeting. Appreciate you need to go, but I would love to sit and have a chat to you at some point. So thank you for your time there. Please do. Yes, you are here to speak to us, and you have done so. Please just go and beat the rush. Hopefully in a moment there'll be the rush of members from this committee leaving. So thank you. So want to go into item number 7, which is the review of the work plan before we take our final item. You'll be mindful that we only have one more meeting of this committee before the end of this municipal year, and that would also be the end of the municipal administration period of 4 years. So it is likely that come the meeting the other side of May, this committee will have a different makeup. We will, because I know for a fact that one of the members isn't standing again, so it will be a different makeup. And so I'm kind of slightly loath to put onto the plate of a new committee a workload that we're not effectively responsible for, although it is quite likely that the parish council members could still be part of this committee moving forward. So I'm just conscious that there are things that we would need to look at the next meeting, but I really don't particularly want to load it too much for the committee that follows us. So that said, does anybody have any comments about the workflow that we have there already? So if you look, I mean, the big part of the next meeting is the draft annual report. I am really comfortable, unless anybody has any urgent items they want to put on there. I'm pretty comfortable with that. The annual report will wrap up this year, and effectively will wrap up the 4 years that we've been sitting, and then that, alongside the monitoring officer's report in respect of complaints, I think for me would be enough. But I'm more than happy to take any suggestions from you as members.
One comment based on what you just said, which is you talked in terms of wrapping up the 4 years.
Is your microphone on?
Yes, it is,
And
but
yeah,
I
you
keep
can
looking
bring
at
it
you. I'll
more
move it around
central.
that side.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
You talk about 4 years, and it's an interesting thought as to whether your last annual report in a 4-year cycle could or should contain any kind of, over the 4 years since the last election. I'm not saying a big section of it, but just a kind of a highlight section of, it's 4 years since there was a municipal election for the principal authority. Here are some of the highlights of 4 years of activity.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Lee, and I don't want to be seen to be kind of not taking the point. So we produce an annual report. That annual report details very clearly what we've done over the last year. That's a relatively new report that we've brought. Whether we want to, in the next meeting when we look at it, whether we want to maybe do a précis of what we've done over the last 4 years. I take your point, but it's an annual report and this report goes to council, and full council effectively adopt it as a report, and I think full council would be aware of what we've done over the last 4 years, or they should be, because they'll have adopted the last 3 reports. But it's a valid point that you make, and maybe we could précis that in somewhere in the report if the officers can just make note of that. Any other comments? No, comfortable with that, happy with that. Thank you very much for that one. That moves us on to our next item, which is item number 8, the monitoring officer's report in respect of complaints received. So you will see we have 2 annexes there. We have one that is in the public domain, and then one, sorry, Mr. Fisher, sorry, Councillor Fisher. I nearly demoted you there, sir.
I obviously have a declaration of interest in this. I would therefore leave the meeting at this point. However, when you come to discuss the meetings in private session, I would like to be readmitted for a short time to make a statement if that's possible.
Okay, with that?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, members are comfortable with that as well. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So just for those that are watching, so we will have a summary of the complaints that are live. And the monitoring officer will give us a summary of those, and then we'll go into a closed session. Can I remind members, please, if you have any questions that may identify an individual, please do reserve those for our closed session. But I'll ask the monitoring officer while we're in open session if you want to give us a quick summary of the annex.
Thank you, Chair. Then essentially, I don't have a great deal to add to what is in the public report in respect of open cases. Whilst there are 5 on the list, it's effectively 3 because some of them are double cases, the same facts and perhaps different complainants. So a small number of cases currently live, all under investigation by legal services staff at CYC, so none currently with external investigators. I know that's something that was of concern to the committee on previous occasion, and in respect of the cost of that. All are coming close to conclusion in terms of a report being ready, but sadly I was unable to have any finalised reports before the committee on this occasion in January. But really little to add in terms, other than the progress that's been made, is that they are at either draft stage or evidence having been gathered, approaching a draft report.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Do any members have, and please again, I reiterate, if your question is opaque enough not to identify a member, that's absolutely fine. Councillor Cobain, I noticed you popped your hand up there.
Thank you, Chair. So just to check then, Francis, so we're still expecting for 2022-18 the report at the end of this month, and as well for 22-13 and 14. And have we got any timescales on 22-16 and 17?
Yeah, yes, I haven't given a timescale to 16 and 17, simply because there is still there has been ongoing absence, which has meant that progress has been intermittent, and I simply haven't got an estimate from the investigator, and I didn't want to commit to one which was unrealistic.
I remember this was an issue, wasn't it, at the last meeting as well? Is the staff absence still ongoing?
Ongoing but intermittent. So it's progress has been made. It's difficult to know because we're dealing with personal issues on 2 sides of the fence here. Chair, could we deal with this in the private part of the session, please?
We will do. Yep. Thank you, Francis. Any more comments? Councillor Rawlings.
Chair, if I may, just a little bit of advice on this one, really. Councillor Fisher has left the room because he has said in open session he's part of one of the complaints, but asked if he can return in private session to make a statement to us. It's not actually within the remit of this committee here today to start listening to statements about a complaint. What we're here to do is talk about the process of the complaint. And I'm concerned that if he comes back in and makes a statement, that may well prejudice us all from taking part in any follow-up issues or meetings.
Thoughts on that?
Chair, perhaps a suggestion might be that I be allowed to go outside and ask Councillor Fisher what the nature of the statement he proposes to make is, and then perhaps the committee can consider the.
Councillor Cobain. Sorry, Councillor Rowling, Councillor Cobain.
Yeah, obviously, I'd assumed that the statement's got nothing to do with the case, because that would be wholly inappropriate.
Yeah.
But if you can find out.
I think finding out in advance would be a sensible way forward.
Yeah.
Clearly, we do it in private session, but I think it's important that that's put on record as well.
Yeah.
We are making those deliberations.
Yeah, fair point. I'm sorry, Mr. Gadd, any questions on the report that is in the public domain?
No, thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you, sir. I only have one, and just obviously at the last meeting we asked for a summary of those cases that are open, and I noticed that the cases that we're referring to start at 2022-13. So are we absolutely confident that every single case prior to this has been resolved? Because there seems to be an awful lot. There was a lot of historic, so they have all been resolved and done. And
Chair, yes.
yep, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure of that. Lovely. Councillor de Goin.
Just a comment. So I think it's helpful the changes that were suggested at the last meeting to enable us to, very much focus on current, live and recently closed cases. So we're not sort of continually reproducing a lot of history in the
all
documents.
trees.
Yeah, exactly.
which you'll be pleased about. Good. Okay. So I'm just going to ask Frances if she would like, please, whilst we're in open session, if you would just like to go and speak to Councillor Fisher, and then we can make a decision as to whether we would ask him to come back in our closed session. But I think that's important that we do that in open session so people can see that we're transparent on that. It would be a couple of minutes. Yeah, I do. By the time you turn it back on again, we'll have the answer. Chris.
Chair, while we've got a slight hiatus, I think what has just taken place has demonstrated one of the reasons why parish councils tend to create and suffer more complaints than other organisations is because we are much more structured here. It's all controlled. We've all got a box in front of us. Everything is done through you. It's being recorded as well. And I imagine it's exactly the same at council meetings. Not many parish councils do this sort of thing.
I would agree with you. And I totally agree with you.
It's simply a matter of fact that therefore, because there is less structure, there's less ability to control it.
Yeah.
It's not the only reason, but it's part of the reason.
No.
Easy to provide and say that this is the problem, not quite so easy to find a solution.
No, I totally agree. And it'd be interesting to have got Sheena's take on that. But I attend 5 parish councils. And they all are chaired very, very differently. I suspect that Councillor Fisher, to his credit, probably chairs his meetings very similar to these. There you go. Yeah. So yeah, I totally agree.
Just a little point in defence. I totally agree, and the point that John made earlier. Sorry, Councillor Galvin made earlier about we're still transmitting is incredibly valid, and actually sometimes goes even further, because somebody stands down and they almost ask the neighbour whether they'd like to go on, or a relative whether they'd like to go on. So it is a real challenge. But also the only thing that diminishes it really is there are more parish councillors. We've got 30 parish councils with, say, an average of 8 to 10 people on it. That is 6 times the number of City of York councillors that are out there. So there is always going to be more complaints as well.
Yeah, and that's a very valid point. Yeah.
Councillor Fisher is simply to convey to members that he is not the cause of delay in respect of the investigation in that case. I said, would he be content for me to relay that in my update to the committee and keep him clean on the matter?
Okay. Yeah. So we've obviously had a conversation there. Councillor Fisher is not going to join us again for our closed session. Sorry. We're still in public session. Sorry, yes, he's not going to join us. I'm saying he's not going to join us for our private session, and we'll explain to you why when we're in private session. So that said, just for the sake of those that are watching, so we are now going to go into private session, and please be aware that we will not be coming back into public session once our meeting has concluded. So those of you that are watching, thank you for your time and for your attention. Those that are watching on catch up, thank you for also bearing with us. And with that, we'll go into private session. Thank you.